Good morning. An interesting gentleman is already off the air, enjoying the conversation with Dr. Bonicelli. And let me talk about it. He's a graduate of Regent. It says here, a graduate of Regent. He serves as the university's executive vice president. Now, he's fairly new to our area. His extensive career includes a presidential appointment with the United States Agency for International Development's USAID Bureau of Latin America and the Caribbean, and a White House appointment as with USAID's Bureau for Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance. Man, I tell you what, right there we've got an hour-long conversation. Now, prior to joining Regent, Dr. Bonicelli served as provost and professor of government at Houston Baptist University. And he also spent several years at Patrick Henry College in Virginia as dean of academic affairs and chairman of the Department of Government. And he served as a staff member of the U.S. House of Representatives International Relations Committee and taught at Grove City College in Pennsylvania. He received a master's degree in public policy from Regent. He has a doctorate from the University of Tennessee and a bachelor's degree from the University of Memphis, and the best trip he ever took was the one he took to Sicily.
Exactly.
You liked it?
I loved it. Loved it. Beautiful place, beautiful food, great wine. Everything was great.
Now, for a young guy who grows up with an Italian family, a mixed family, Italian, and also probably some Anglos, German, Irish background, and so you go to Sicily. Tell me the difference in the food, like what you expected when you had the food there. Was this the Italian food you're getting at Roma Pizza in Tennessee?
No, I was going to say it's just the difference between going to Olive Garden and going to somebody's real cucina in Italy. It was very nice.
Now, are you a world traveler, Dr. Bonicelli? Have you traveled around quite a bit?
I have. My jobs in the Bush administration as well as for the Congress. I've been to, I guess, about 30 or 40 countries at least in all the continents. My professional field, my academic field is development, study of democracy, study of economics, economic development, and I've done those jobs in government. So I've traveled a lot.
Now tell us how, that's fascinating to me, Dr. Bonicelli. Take all the time you need, but to be brought to the attention of the President of the United States and to get a government position of the nature you did, a Bureau of Latin America and the Caribbean, all of the world is so important to us, but this is so close to us.
Yeah.
How does somebody come to light? How does somebody come to other people be aware of you, to know you, to give you that gig?
You know, it is sort of earth-shattering to the student of government who thinks that everything is a science and it's all perfect, but it's all persons, personalities, connections, networks. I had gone to Regent University, and because of that, I did an internship in Mexico with a Mexican senator whom I met because he was a guest on the 700 Club. And so he gave me an internship. I wanted to study Mexican foreign policy, the way they were dealing with Central America versus the way the Reagan administration was dealing with Central America. And from there, I came to the attention of people in Washington, got a job working for Congress, met people like Elliott Abrams, who had been serving in the Reagan administration, and others who were focused on Latin America. I'm less focused on Latin America today than I was 20 years ago, but still keep up with it, of course. So all of those personal connections, I can draw a line back, through my career, using human beings who knew me and told someone, oh, you ought to look at Paul. He knows what he's doing there. He can help you there, that kind of thing.
Cultivating relationships,
Absolutely.
networking, and meeting the right people and being nice and showing them that you can actually do the job.
Absolutely. But when I have a student who complains about an internship where they just make copies and get coffee, I reprimand them and tell them that is how you will make a difference. Someone will find that you are faithful and loyal and you do your job and you don't complain. And the next thing you know, you're a staff member for a member of Congress or something like that.
Wow. Dr. Paul Bonicelli, a most interesting gentleman here today with us. When you see, I was disappointed, and I bought Buchanan's latest book about his fears about what our country is going to become. And then I saw another book, and I went to the bookstore, but I saw a review of it somewhere. And this one gentleman writes, and when you talk about like somebody who's got some expertise in Latin America, and I think his last name is Woodward. I haven't got the book yet. I'll have it by Thursday. And I'd like to get this guy on the air. And he says that our country actually is like 11 different countries now when it comes down to the way we look at things. Like, it's very different. Attitudes from the Northeast. In fact, he breaks down, and one of the areas is actually called Tidewater. And what do you think when you hear about that, like the future, somebody who is somewhat of an expert on Latin America and the Caribbean, how is that going to play? I don't see how it would be any other way that our country is going to have a much greater Hispanic influence. Here's a guy named Macrini and a guy named Bonicelli. Why is that good? Why is that bad? What is the good? What is the bad? How do you see it playing out?
You know, I think it is quite normal. It's as old as the ancient Greeks and Romans. They struggle with these issues. People are first and foremost attracted to be a part of a group, something innate, something that is kind of inexplicable, something that is rooted in their ethnicity, the language that they speak, the culture. That's totally normal. We should celebrate it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's when we interact with other communities that we have to have civilization. We have to have the idea that there's something above each of us. I think it's universal law that comes from a lawgiver, God. Natural law theory would teach that. Those who don't want to believe in God would just say that it is it's a part of the laws of nature. But whatever it is, it's something above us that draws us together. There's a reason why no matter where you look in the world over time, people always consider murder wrong, child rape wrong, all those kinds of things. Right. So it's good to have these differences. They are quite normal. They enrich our lives. They lend us scientific discoveries, creativity, because the different way people do things.
So things will be different 50 years from now. Maybe we wouldn't recognize the country, but it isn't necessarily going to be bad, because you would say that with the people who are coming into this country, there are recurring threads when it comes to principle.
Oh, absolutely. And the reason why it's never a threat to the United States is because we are a country founded on an idea. And so as long as you share that idea, those overarching things I was talking about, you have a country. You have a purpose for existing, a mission to accomplish, and a way to continue. If you take certain European countries, France, for example, you can't become a Frenchman, because to be French means to be born that way with certain blood in a certain place or whatever. And they're in real danger, because as people care less about that, then others come in. There's no more France. There's just a place that people from other parts of the world are coming to live now, and that's happening all over Europe.
Mm-hmm. But are we not, if we're going to go to Woodward's book, and there are 11 different sections of our country, will the balkanization, so you don't see it as a negative thing? Obviously you don't, because that's what you said.
It can be. I think it can be.
And there's not a central idea of what it means to be an American.
And now we're at the American education system. When the schools don't teach people, when there's not a common civic lesson taught, and there's not anymore, you get it in private schools, Christian schools, home schools, but that's about it. When you don't have that common lesson taught anymore of what those overarching principles are, it will matter. It will be a problem. As long as we can make money in this country, people can tend to get along to make money. That's why this Occupy Wall Street and the bad economy is a real strain on us.
So I guess, do I hear you saying that the public schools have been put into a situation where there are so many rules and regulations, everything is written out, everything, that the young people, as opposed to if they're getting, like the Catholic school that I went to, or a more religious organization, or a private school perhaps, they're told what to do but not why, where you're advocating that they're told what to do and why it is in their best interest.
Sure, yeah. And
the public schools can't do that?
Well, they used to, could do it, and they began to not do it because John Dewey won, the great philosopher, social and political philosopher of the left, essentially, progressives. Because we were to make democracy. Democracy was to be a way of life. And what it meant was the experts would tell us what's the best way to live, to be progressive. And a lot of things fell away, like patriotism, communities being part of a patchwork that made up one whole, that kind of thing.
Wow. Paul Bonicelli is here today. But when it comes to an idea like patriotism, I mean, like Dewey, what did Dewey advocate where there would be less of a patriotic fervor implanted in the children?
I think the Dewey and the students of Dewey, the worst thing that they did was create a school system where people don't think anymore. They're cogs in a wheel to accomplish the economic goals of whatever the experts in power were, industrialization, that kind of thing. And people are not creative anymore. If you look at Occupy Wall Street, what is so sad about that is a product of modern American education. 22-year-olds, spoiled rotten, who think that everything was supposed to be given to them. You know, they got a degree in bitterness studies, and they can't find a job. Surprise, surprise.
How true, man. You know, I hate to be so agreeing with the guest here, but that's the same thing I got from it, but I've been chastised for it. Who was I in here with? The bishop. Or the guy who's running for...
E.W. Jackson.
Yeah. We were chastised because both of us, I said, I guess we have more of a romantic ideal of what people can be. I saw a young fellow, and I thought it was sad, and I said, boy, thank goodness he is not my son. And he's going on and on about how I owe $50,000 because I borrowed that money to be a commercial artist. Well, work hard and pay it back. I can't get a good job. Very rarely do you start as commandant of the Marine Corps. A lot of people start as a second lieutenant or a private. It's just so unfair. No kidding. Armed with that knowledge, where do we go from here? Whoa!
It is, and I've been in higher education for most of my career, off and on in government and higher ed, and I'm not that old. But I paid my way, I got whatever the government allowed. I certainly got that. I did take Pell Grants, but when it came to borrowing, I lived the way a student lives. I didn't live a middle-class lifestyle, thinking that whatever my parents provided could now be replicated as a college student. How else do you accumulate $150,000 if you're just going to a typical school? I'm not talking about going to Harvard or Yale. It's because you think that you should live the same way you lived at home, or even better, maybe. I don't know.
Now, do you hear any validity to their complaints? Do they have points that they are making that you think are good ones? Is there some legitimacy to some of them who have more coherent complaints?
Yeah, you don't hear a lot of coherent points, but the idea that people of that generation are frustrated, that there is unemployment of 9% and higher, that very rich people in the economy have been aligned with political figures, and they have made their money and they've not suffered the consequences of failure. That's frustrating to people, and that makes perfect sense. So I applaud them for being upset about that. I wish that they were not automatically on the left and therefore willing to absolve most politicians, because the root of the problem is always the politics. We wouldn't have had the crash of the banks. We wouldn't have had all of these things if it hadn't been for politicians, social engineering, insisting people should have a house if they can't afford it, that kind of thing.
And I tell you what, I was surprised, because I thought when Mitt Romney said recently, perhaps these people should be foreclosed on, perhaps they should be renting, and the houses should be sold to other people who are capable of paying for them. And that's seen as unfair and a horrible thing to say. I mean, I have a house I can afford. I'd like to have one I can't afford, but I can't afford it, so I don't have it.
No, I'm
live within your means.
Exactly. And I'm not a big fan of Sarah Palin, but I think one of the bravest things a politician has done in my lifetime is when she was running with John McCain and made the statement, maybe if you can't afford the house, you shouldn't have it.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine that is a shocking thing to say in the United States? That's controversial.
Well, not at all, really, because when you see how the country has spent itself into a hole, we're responsible for it. Every individual who has inculcated that attitude into their kid that life is not fair and I should have a lot more than I actually worked for, well, it's the same thing we're doing. We're going to borrow and borrow and borrow. It's just like when you hear all these politicians in the presidential race, no matter what side they're on.
Well, back to those overarching moral principles.
Yeah.
That was something that held us together.
Pay your bills?
Pay your bills, exactly. You can't have something if you don't work for it. That's right. And the self-esteem movement, I guess it's a 1960s phenomenon, but it's never gone away, this idea that we keep telling ourselves and the next generation how wonderful we are. I mean, what's this thing, the Tiger Mom or whatever, the Japanese American woman who wrote the book and everybody's criticizing. I mean, come on. There's a lot of truth and good stuff there. My parents and grandparents never told me I was the greatest thing in the world. They praised me when I needed it, but they also told me when I was wrong.
Right.
I wasn't crushed when I got out in the world, and not everybody thought I was the greatest thing in the world.
Right. And that whole thing I remember with I am somebody and self-esteem, I thought that is not, it seemed that the idea came out that is something that you have by virtue of the fact that you exist. No, it's from accomplishment. And how do you feel good? Like sometimes I notice in myself, if I'm sitting around on a day and I'm doing nothing, I feel crappy. But if you actually do something, vacuum, do something, you feel better because you're actually producing something.
Well, you remember the old Jesse Jackson used to say, clean up your house, take care of your property, all these kinds of things. That's how he came to prominence, being a part of the civil rights movement. Which was in line with what Dr. King would teach. And then it became much more politically useful to be a victim. And so who teaches that anymore? Who teaches that to people? It's a shame. Some do. Robert Woodson, Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, several people like that do. But for the most part, white, black, rich, poor, everybody thinks that they're privileged or should be privileged, and they think in terms of self-esteem based upon reality TV shows. You know, how do you get famous in America? You just do stupid stuff on TV instead of accomplishing something. How about having high self-esteem because I can read and write and do math, I have skills, I can make my way in the world. It is a different country now.
Dr. Paul Bonicelli is here, a most interesting chap. And if you want to join the conversation, feel free to chime in, 627-7979, toll free from anywhere in the Old Dominion if it works, 888-756-7979. Email Tony@WNIS.com. Now, moving on from that and education and the future, the kids and everything. But I tell you what, looking at this presidential race, an exciting time for those of us in talk radio and guys like you who find all of this fascinating. Looking at this whole thing with Herman Cain, your thoughts, Dr. Bonicelli?
I'm astounded. I mean, I'm a Herman Cain fan. I mean, he's not my primary choice, but I'm a fan because I love bold, clear talk. I love people with executive experience. If nothing else, the country is seeing the difference between a person who has spent his life leading and accomplishing things, enterprises, producing things, goods and services, and a person who has never done anything like that and is floundering. That's the way I would compare those two, and I think that's a healthy thing, especially if we're going to put so much emphasis on race, and I'm sorry we do, but if we're going to, what a wonderful contrast to show these two folks. As far as his particular problems, I have no way of judging how much he erred. But I think he's handled it horribly. I would have expected this candidate to immediately say things that would put it to bed, which is basically just fess up to whatever it was and then move on. So will he get past it? I still don't think he can be the nominee because I think eventually...
Because of this?
No, not necessarily because of this. And if more bad things come out, I guess that would kill it. But I don't think that he can because when you get close to January and people start really seriously thinking about their vote, much of the support he has now is people protesting typical candidates and liking this different kind of candidate.
Anti-Romney.
Yeah, exactly. And anti-Perry, too. I mean, I think that's, because he's a politician forever, and Cain is not, that kind of thing. But once people get to that seriousness, they're going to think about things like, well, 999 is interesting and novel, but it actually, probably will cause increased taxes for people at levels below 100,000, that kind of thing. Some of the shine will come off. But where it'll go, I don't know. I can't see what happens when Romney really can't get above 25 and 30% right now, and Perry has been kind of in neutral and not doing the running the campaign people thought he would.
No, it's with the Herman Cain thing, it seems that there's no end to it, and there really isn't. I thought it was unfair that the women who reacted to it didn't come out and lend their pictures to it, and now it's out there. He's defending, and a lot of people have questions.
I think people fundamentally, the reason his support has gone up or stayed steady and the money that he's bringing in has gone up is because people don't like this anymore. And when they get this new fresh face that they are attracted to, because they clearly were even before, they don't like the fact that what you just said. People can make allegations and never come forward, not back them up. The one woman was going to, then she decided not to because she works in government. Does that mean she works in the federal government and it could reflect on Obama and cause a problem for him? People are suspicious of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I wish they had, that it put an end to it either way, and then they could move on. Now, Dr. Bonicelli, we always hear this lately, that it's good because he's a businessman, and for the life of me, the government isn't a business. They don't run as a profit. If you look at all the different things, the Hoover Dam, the highway system, it isn't a business. It's not the same thing. When we look at the people who we consider our most productive or greatest presidents, with the exception of George Washington, none of them are businessmen. Abraham Lincoln wasn't, FDR wasn't. And we always hear about the 70% approval for Governor Bob McDonnell. I'll have him on tomorrow, and I'll ask him what business he was successful in, but yet he's a very successful governor. Isn't there something to be said for having to learn how to work within government? I mean, do you begin, is running for president an entry-level position? Don't they have to learn how this all works?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. By the way, tell Bob hi. We were classmates together at Regent.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the 20-year-old punk, and he was the guy 10 years older in a suit, and I looked up to him, but would never have told him that, of course. I don't think that being the businessman in office is the most important thing. It's having executive authority, having run something, having been responsible for outcomes. And President Obama never has. Many politicians never have. But those that have been governors, that's why our founders understood governors as probably ideal, because they thought of the executive as having to have experience.
Makes sense.
Absolutely, and that's why I think you could make an extremely credible argument that Sarah Palin was better suited for the presidency than Barack Obama, simply because she had executive experience. I'm sorry, she quit it early. It wasn't the most vast and extensive, but he's had none, and that's why, of course, senators and congressmen are not.
He's had 3 years now.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is, and McDonald will make that case over and over because, he doesn't want to come out and back anybody, but he always says that it's somebody who's a governor, and it might seem self-serving, but it isn't, because you think, you got to hit the ground running. I mean, if you've never even been mayor of Williamsburg, and all of a sudden you're going to be president of the United States, can you imagine who among us has not perhaps been put into a situation where you would look at the guy who you were subordinate to and you thought, oh, what a total incompetent. I could do that job so much better than him, until you actually got it. And then you realized, oh, okay. Right. And you could even see that with even President Obama, where so many of the things that he lambasted the Bush administration for, whether it be Guantanamo or the situation in Iraq, he's now carried out all the plans that Bush...
Absolutely.
And so once you get in there, I think there's so much to learn. So at least have some ability in government. I don't think it's an entry level, and I think it's kind of it's okay to be confident, but there's a question of arrogance in an unpleasant way to overestimate your abilities.
Well, back to those original principles. People don't know how to be humble anymore. People don't know how to appreciate the fact.
Wait till the ratings come out. I'll show you how.
People do not. It's a self-esteem movement, and I think 2008's election was an emotional outburst. I mean, people weren't thinking logically about all of this. They just didn't like what they had.
I don't know that they weren't thinking logically. I've never I always voted for libertarians or Republicans, but I was so disgusted with what I thought was the 2-1 constitutional wars, with being told that this gentleman was a conservative. He gets up there on stage, President Bush, and he puts his hand around Ted Kennedy and said, I never realized what a great guy he was, and they've got this big federal government grab over education. And then I see John McCain, who never saw war, he didn't like, who says, this economic problem, no, this is the big economic catastrophe in 50 years. Oh, it's nothing. The fundamentals are sound. A nation of 4 million people. Georgia gets into a hassle with the Soviet Union, with Russia. He wants to start World War III going in on their side. No, it was a rejection of a failed Republican Party. Give us anybody.
I'm with you on the failed Republican Party, but to me, that's only one part of the logic.
Right.
You got to know, what am I embracing? And that's what's scary to me, because I saw some of my students in undergrad, not where I am now, other places, who do just reach out for something different, and that's alarming. That's concerning.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right, because I myself will fall into that category. I thought, this guy, he's saying he's going to keep it going in Afghanistan, but I wanted to believe that he would end it sooner, and so therefore I thought he would, and he hasn't. And it's disappointed a lot of people. And I wonder, like guys like me, who voted for him the last time because I was so disgusted with the Republicans and wasn't really a big fan of Bob Barr, I have no intention of voting for him this time, but I don't know who I'm going to vote for or if I'm going to vote. So I'm wondering how that is going to affect things. Because I cannot be the only one.
No, I'm curious. Would you not vote for him because of his failures or anything else?
I would not vote for him because the wars have not ended. I would not vote for him because he thought that the United States had some great interest in whatever the hell it is we're doing in Libya. I would not vote for him because he's come out and sided with people who I don't know if they were the Sons of Liberty holding up pictures of John Adams or they were the sons of Osama bin Laden, and he decided to jump in with them. That's too much for me. And I reserve the right to change my mind. I'm not a horse with blinders, but as it is today, I don't see me voting for him.
I have this theory that the reason he can't be reelected is, we know that he got elected because of independence. And a lot of those people are, like you just said, they're disappointed that he hasn't done the things that they thought, and he did the things they thought he wouldn't do. But even bigger than that, I think there are a lot of people who say, you fooled me. You ran as a moderate. I let the Jeremiah Wright stuff go. I let all the Bill Ayers stuff go. I let it all go because you presented yourself as different. And dadgummit, you were exactly everything the critics said you were. And worse. Before, 2 months, you're calling the police stupid and all these kinds of things. I think that makes a lot of people say, you know what, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, that's not happening.
Now, But I guess, and I agree that the independents and a lot of the states, 12 states where he did well the last time around, is he going to do well this time in our own state of Virginia? Mm-hmm. But all our friends in the Tea Party, all those who are kind of like more of the old Barry Goldwater Republican libertarians, man, they're going to have a hard time pulling the lever for Mitt Romney.
Yep. That's why he can't get above 25 or 30%.
Oh, and so I don't know. And then I look at who has Obama got. Now, every time I see Herman Cain going out there about electrocuting Hispanics, oh, man, I saw Bill Richardson on. He was hammering that home. And so the Democrats got them in a national election. And there's all these different disparate groups, people in unions, the VEA, a lot of people who can get out the vote. Now, here's why I think Obama has more of a chance than people are saying. To this day, I know people who love Obama. I do, to this day. I'm a little off him, as I pointed out. I don't know anybody, I've yet to meet anybody who's for Romney. I don't know. I know people who love Cain. I know people, Burke here is a big Huntsman supporter.
I think that's true. He doesn't engender love that way. That's why I think someone like Paul Ryan is going to be picked for Veep.
Wow.
I think because you got to do something to make the Tea Party say, okay, I can deal with you. This is the Mitt Romney that you are.
Yeah.
And he certainly can't.
Got to get him fired up. That's
exactly,
a good thought.
Exactly.
And just like having somebody named Paul.
Exactly.
Now,
absolutely.
I saw one story of Dr. Bonicelli that I thought, you got to be kidding me, where they're actually running this up the flagpole, Condoleezza Rice. And I thought the only reason is, you think Mitt's boring?
Right. No,
she's
that's
a nice lady. Yeah. I respect her. I admire
and that's
her.
Pandering. That's silly. She has no interest and
Paul Ryan. That'll get him fired up, huh?
Absolutely. It's got to be somebody like that because he has to shore up that side of what he's doing. There'll be plenty of emphasis on we've got to beat Obama no matter what. The country's over if we don't. That'll be the message. And the Tea Party, that will resonate with them. But to have them really excited, can you imagine if Paul Ryan is the VP? How could Tea Party people say he's
no, you're
fake?
Right. You're absolutely right. Dr. Paul is absolutely right. Dr. Paul Bonicelli is absolutely right. Boy, that would be an exciting ticket. Is that something you could get behind? Something to think about? 627-7979, 888-756-7979. Toll free is the toll free number, 888-756-7979. Email Tony, Tony, at WNIS.com. Paul Ryan, could you see that on the ticket? Would that be exciting with Mitt Romney? Now, do you know, you have some inside scoop on that, or you're just guessing? You figure that would be...
I'm hearing more people that sort of watch these things very closely talk about that as a possibility, just because from a political need, as well as just sort of the posture of Paul Ryan. And Mitt's sort of embracing some of the elements of Paul Ryan's budget.
And the Rubio guy, he was looking pretty good for a while, but now there's some confusion about his pedigree.
Yeah, I think that'll pass, but I think Rubio would be less interested in being with Romney and more with Perry if it came about that way. I think a lot of Marco Rubio.
Rick Perry, the one, it was very unfair, and I was guilty of it myself because sometimes you go for the joke, but I decided that his performance in New Hampshire about a week ago, where he came off looking a little bit, some might say silly, some indicated that they thought he was intoxicated. I don't think he was. He might have been a little bit of a buzz from the back surgery that he'd had. But others have said that's part of his personality. When I watched the whole thing in its entirety, it wasn't bad at all.
No, friends of mine that...
Is he playing it, and let me ask you the question, is he playing it where he's lowering expectations? I mean, I wonder if this is calculated in any way.
I think the elements here are, number one, when he's tired, he is giddy. That friends of mine who have been with him, I've only seen him a couple of times, but friends of mine who are pretty close say that's what he does when he's tired. Okay. And, we each have our different ways we present when we're, in different circumstances. I think that's one thing. The second thing is, as you just said, people who either saw the whole thing or were actually in the room thought nothing of it. They didn't see anything to it. And third, he's used to Texas, where it's much easier to just totally be yourself. I heard some of the things, the way he said some things that I've been scolded by somebody before. And he's not used to having that happen a lot in Texas because, it's Texas and it's a little more insulated.
Well, when people used to rag on Robert Byrd, and I would say, now you got to imagine that it's 1935, and he's in this little hamlet in West Virginia, and they got some fiddle players and some girls clogging on a flatbed truck, and he's going to get up there and sing a little song, and these people don't have TV, and they don't have radio, they don't have electricity, and this is the best show they're ever going to see. What I saw was a man who the first speechifying that impressed him was some minister.
Yep.
Or Billy Saul Hargis or something on the radio like that's what and he comes out of that. And so if that is totally alien to you, then he'd have seemed freakish. But if that's not alien to you, you say, okay, he comes out of that.
Exactly.
Background.
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, but if you saw the whole thing, man, you get such a different impression. So the truth is the whole, as you've been wont to say.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. We're going to take a break. Very pleased to have this gentleman here, Dr. Paul Bonicelli, an incredible resume, an interesting guy. And we'll get to your phone lines. Joseph, you've been waiting a long time. We'll get to you. Anybody else, you want to get into foreign policy, Occupy Wall Street, we talked about that a little bit. Anything you want to bring up, let us hear from you. 627-7979, 888-756-7979. Let's go to Joseph in Virginia Beach. He's on with me and Dr. Paul Bonicelli. Hello, Joseph.
Hi, how you doing, Tony?
Very well, thank you. Go ahead, please.
We need somebody to be president, somebody with experience, okay? Obama didn't have any experience. Herman Cain doesn't have experience, okay? We need somebody. I think that Mitt Romney is the one that fit right now. I think the reason he doesn't fly with the poll, I think it's something to do because he's Mormon. I hope not, but I think this is why. His experience, he's been a governor for many years. He proved himself good. But I think that to take, and Herman Cain is a good speaker as Obama is a good speaker. He's a charismatic, like Obama charismatic. But you know what? The bottom line, they both have no experience. Are we willing to take a chance with the country with somebody that has no experience? I don't think so. This is my opinion.
I'm always glad to hear your opinion, and I thank you for the call. Your comment, sir. Let me turn his microphone on. You can hear him so much better if I turn it up.
There you go. I don't have to shout. I don't think that it is the Mormon issue because most people don't care about things like that. But you wait until it's Obama versus Romney, and the Obama campaign will make sure you know how scary and strange Mormons are. Now, I put that in quotes, of course.
No, I understand your point, and yes, they will use it, certainly. Any opponent would use it.
I think Romney's problem is the same problem. People feel burned by Obama by being so competent at look and speech and all of that, and then they didn't get what they wanted. And I think Romney looks like that to them. He looks like a robot. I mean, that's sort of the joke. That's why Cain and others continue to be popular.
Well, they're afraid if Romney gets in, we'll find out exactly how competent Obama was. Maybe he was.
Right.
Now, the Mormon thing, I was surprised to hear you say, Doctor, that you don't think it'll, or whatever you said, that the way you characterized it,
I don't think right now it matters. Okay. I don't think it's the thing that's holding him back.
But you, like I, know people who religion is very, very important to them.
Mm-hmm.
And although I don't think it should be a factor, because what I would say, if I was advocating for Romney, I would say this man has held elected office. His father was governor of Michigan. Can you tell me anything that he or his father did when they held elected office that you thought was negative that they did because they were Mormons?
Right. Nothing. No,
Nothing.
Exactly.
But I know people in my own extended family who think very little of the Roman Catholic Church and Baptists and Papists, and they think it's a cult. And that is just nothing compared to the way they look at Mormonism.
Right. Yeah, I think, and that's why I think this is latent. I don't think that it's driving any ceiling for him right now at 25 to 30%, but I think it will become an issue. And that's a shame, because if people were thoughtful about it, they can have whatever the view they want about Mormonism, whether they think it's really Christianity or not, etc. But what you just said is exactly right. We judge people by what their beliefs make them do in public policy, and Mormons are equal to what people who are conservative Catholic or conservative evangelicals, conservative Protestant, period. It's respect for America's founding, the principles that founded it, Judeo-Christian morality, all those things.
Well, and
that's the way Mormons live.
Yes, I agree. And if you look at Mitt Romney, he seems to have a very wonderful relationship with his wife.
And his kids, yeah.
There are no scandals. He's brought up productive children. I mean,
exactly.
You know, I mean, if you're going to get somebody who's the exact same religious view as you, it might be very hard to find. If other things, I think, I guess we all change our minds. Nobody's perfect, right? But I guess if Like a gentleman actually called me up and he said, well, I don't see why you have a problem with Romney changing his mind. He said one thing when he was trying to get elected governor of Massachusetts. Now he wants to be president of the United States. He'd be representing different people and different points of view. I said, well, the reason I have a problem with it is I would rather have a person who has a definite set of principles that even though I might disagree with some view, he could persuade me why it was in the best interest to have his view rather than just telling me what I want to hear.
Right.
So Romney's biggest problem is people sitting on their hands and not voting.
No, I think you're right. And a lot of folks who follow this closely are concerned about this. If Romney were elected and he had a supermajority in the Senate and was, had the House, we wouldn't worry that everything we want, Paul Ryan's policies, whatever you call it, conservative fiscal policies, Jim DeMint, they'd all be done. He'd have no reason to buckle or compromise. But if he is close and he has to fight for things, then the fear is this is a guy from Massachusetts who's flip-flopped before, and we're not going to get what we want. And that drives the Tea Party. They're sick of it. They don't want to put up with that anymore. That's why people like Kane, Sarah Palin, others get so much attention from them. They want the real deal.
Well, I think sometimes here in Virginia, people who don't have a lot of experience with the Northeast or New England I happen to have lived in Vermont, and I went to school in Connecticut, and I have friends throughout the Northeast, and I talk to them about politics. They have no idea how liberal they are, far beyond what is considered a liberal in Virginia. And so for somebody like me, I say, man, to get elected, even if you're a Republican, governor of Massachusetts, wow.
Right.
I wonder how much he and Obama really disagree on.
Right.
No,
it's a good question.
Yeah, and if he gets in there, like so many of us who were disappointed with President Bush, who found out that perhaps he wasn't exactly, he seemed much more like a Northeast Rockefeller Republican than the Goldwater Republican that Ronald Reagan was. And you're wondering, what's this guy going to be if he's actually in power?
Right.
Yeah, who knows?
No, that's the problem. That's one of the things he faces.
Yeah, then again, maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised. Who knows? Let's go to Harry, who's going to bring up an interesting question. Romney and Gingrich. I'm glad he's calling in with that. Harry, go ahead, please.
Hey, good morning.
Welcome, Harry.
Talking. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Because I'm afraid I'm about to lose my cell phone battery. Anyway, you guys are sitting talking about somebody that we need, and the guy we need is Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich is one of the smartest men. I mean, he's one of the best guys that you could have in there. And I work with Ronald Reagan. He knows all of the things that Ronald Reagan did. And Newt Gingrich would take Obama in one of those debates and take him apart.
All right.
Newt Gingrich is the right guy.
All right, let's see. Thank you very much for the call, Harry. Good to have you as a listener. Mr. Newt Gingrich. A lot of people think the world of Mr. Newt. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's incredible. He was Speaker when I worked for the Congress as a staffer, and he is the smartest guy. There's no question. Smartest guy in politics, next to Michael Barone, the editorialist, writes columns, and the Political Almanac. I saw Newt's chief of staff it's almost a year ago, and I said, well, he's got the conservative professor vote wrapped up. So, that's 10 people.
All right. Yeah,
And the problem for him has been the baggage of what people have said about his marriages and that kind of thing. But also the professory guy is not necessarily the most attractive. But you look at this slow climb. I think there's a role for Newt. If he can be, second fiddle, either in the cabinet, I doubt VP, but there's a role for him. But I can't see him getting it. I just can't.
It's interesting you would say a professory guy, because then you got two professory guys. Could you see him and Obama having a debate?
Right. Well, that's the thing that people salivate over is he would destroy anybody. And I think that's, you can be pro or anti-Obama, but that's just the truth. Newt, his command of facts is incredible.
He's done himself well in the debates. I mean, he was like nowhere, and now little by little he's climbing.
When you combine, photographic memory and the intellect that he has with boldness, with courage, it's formidable. I mean, the only thing he lacks is good looks. If he were good looking, my gosh, this would be some sort of...
So you think that the thing that's really holding him back is the baggage and the professorial attitude?
I think it's that, and people just the media did such a good job of making Mitt the bad guy in the 90s with Clinton.
Oh, okay.
That it's very hard to overcome that.
I never understood the thing with the jewelry. I never understood that. Why that was such a bad. So the guy has money and he wanted to buy some jewelry. What do I care?
Yeah, the number of stories exactly about having an account at Tiffany's compared to how much money Obama and Michelle made with the Resco deals and the
I'm
real
more
estate.
concerned with him when they spend my money. When he spends his own, I'm good.
Yeah, I couldn't care less.
What was that with that Resco? What was that? There was some
just
there?
Interesting ways that the Obamas got their hands on land and property at a cost that you and I could never have gotten it that low, and then the guy they deal with is indicted, and I think he's in jail.
Yeah.
So the people have been. We could be here forever talking about the media's double standard.
Well, but their standard is money. But it does appear that many of the people who go into the media, certainly they're on the left. But I've got to tell you, having worked in broadcasting my whole life, and I know you've done a lot in broadcasting, the people who actually own the outlets, they're all about money.
Yeah, there's no question. Which is why Fox has made it so big, and then you see CNN struggling and trying to find conservatives to do their shows and all that.
They're doing better now with Anderson Cooper.
Yes.
And he does a pretty credible show in as much as he doesn't really take a side. It's a search. And he's hard on the liberals and he's hard on the right-wingers.
I hope he doesn't ruin his career with his Oprah show, though. I know he's got an afternoon show, and when I saw the topics, I thought, oh, how do you look at yourself in the mirror?
He's on 3 hours a day. This guy's working.
Yeah,
it's a tribute. Let's go one more call, and this is going to be Lee in Petersburg. Lee, you're going to get the final say for me and Dr. Paul Bonicelli. Go ahead, Lee.
Thank you very much. I've sat on Saturday and spoke with 6 men who were over 50, and as we spoke about who we wanted to have to go into the presidency for the next term, we came to conclude it's someone who has integrity, who has principle, and we know that we're headed in a poor direction with those who demonstrate they have that not. And so we don't have a clear candidate yet, but we are very concerned that this is the basis by which we should be making these elections. And what do you think of those principles? That concern.
All right, thank you for the call.
Yeah, I think integrity, if we're talking about integrity as one of those principles, I think above all, that's the kind of thing people are looking at it. I think people are very frightened about where the country is now, and they want plans, they want details to some degree, but they also want to trust a person. They don't feel like they can trust politicians. That's clear. It's worse than it's been in a long time. And so I think that is true. That is the kind of thing they're looking for.
Where would Sarah Palin be if she'd gotten in?
I don't know, because I never was bitten by that bug. I was never as impressed as so many people.
Is it too late for anybody else to get in?
No, because there are historical precedents that you can. Now, it's hard to get on the ballot in certain places, and you'd have to count on the convention doing it for you. But for all intents and purposes, no, we're going to have to pick from these. It's going to
be one of these people.
And that makes the VP pick, that much more important, and, suggesting who would be in my cabinet, and, here's the first things I'll do in the first 100 days, all of that.
Boy, if he can get that out early, and Paul Ryan, that would satiate a lot of people on the right. That's a good thought.
Yeah, I think if he could do something like that.
Another great guest from Regent University. As you know, we hate to go more than 3 or 4 days without having another great guest from Regent University. What a pleasure to have on Dr. Paul Bonicelli. Dr. Paul Bonicelli, thank you. What a pleasure.